What happens when one of Hollywood's most iconic stars reaches the edge of patience, and the bright lights of daytime television become a pressure cooker ready to explode? Imagine the set of The View, cameras rolling, lights blazing, and a live audience buzzing with anticipation. The laughter, the polite claps, the hum of chatter, it all seemed normal at first. But in just seconds, the atmosphere became electric, charged with a tension so thick you could slice it with a knife. Before we dive into the whirlwind, take a moment to subscribe to Stage View and hit that like button if you love these explosive Hollywood stories. Comment below with your predictions. You won't believe how this escalates. The day had started like any other. Tom Cruise, the legendary actor whose career had spanned decades of blockbuster hits and jaw-dropping stunts, walked onto the set with his trademark charm. His smile, polished and practiced, masked a mind already bracing for a gauntlet of probing questions. The audience erupted into applause, some standing, others waving signs that read Mission Impossible Forever or Top Gun Maverick Fan Club. Cameras panned across the crowd, catching every gleam of excitement. Joy Behar, sharp-tongued and fearless, sat perched in her seat, eyes twinkling with a mischievous spark. She was known for pushing boundaries, testing even the most poised celebrities, and today, the air between her and Tom would crackle like lightning before a storm. The conversation began innocuously, almost teasingly. "Tom, you've done your own stunts, jumped out of planes, raced motorcycles. Do you ever get scared?" Joy asked, a playful lilt in her voice. The audience chuckled, sensing this was the type of question designed to charm viewers. Tom leaned forward slightly, a rehearsed grin on his face, and replied, "Every time. Every stunt carries a risk. That's what makes it real." The tension was subtle at first, like a slow burn. But Joy's eyes narrowed ever so slightly, and the smile faded from Tom's face. She tilted her head, and in that small motion, the dynamic shifted. The audience, sensing a change, hushed, their curiosity piqued. "You've been very public about your personal life," Joy continued, voice steady but laced with insinuation. "Some might say, overly public. Do you ever feel pressured to present yourself a certain way, almost larger than life?" Tom's jaw tightened imperceptibly. He paused, choosing his words with the precision of a seasoned actor preparing for a climactic scene. "I live my life fully," he said evenly, though a faint edge crept into his tone. "I don't think anyone should dictate how I express myself." The audience applauded politely, but you could feel a ripple of anticipation sweeping through the room. Joy, sensing she had poked the bear, leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper only she and Tom could hear. "But Tom, don't you think that sometimes your intensity, maybe it overwhelms people?" The phrase hung in the air like a challenge. Tom's eyes narrowed, a storm brewing behind them. He looked past Joy, toward the cameras, toward the audience, as if weighing the gravity of his next words. "Intensity is part of passion," he said carefully. "I don't apologize for giving everything I have." But Joy wasn't done. Her smile was no longer playful. It was predatory, teasing out the reaction she could already sense simmering beneath his calm exterior. "Sure, but some might say that intensity can cross lines, that it can be intimidating." At that moment, the audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A few gasps, subtle but audible, broke the polite hum of conversation. The camera zoomed in on Tom's face, capturing every micro-expression. A flicker of disbelief, a tightening of his lips, a flash of fury restrained by years of public composure. Tom leaned forward, his voice dropping to a level that was commanding yet visibly strained. "Intimidating," he echoed. "You think I intimidate people?" The tension was palpable now, like static electricity before a thunderclap. The audience leaned in, hungry for the next move. Joy, unfazed, held his gaze, her smile thin but deliberate. "Some have said," she began, trailing off as if letting the idea linger like a blade suspended in midair. Something shifted in Tom then, a rapid, almost imperceptible change in posture. His hands gripped the edge of the table, knuckles whitening, and the calm he had worn like armor began to crack. The lights seemed brighter, the audience's applause dimmer, as if the room itself were holding its breath. And then it happened. A sharp intake of breath, a sudden pivot, and Tom's voice erupted, cutting through the polite tension like a knife. "You have no idea what you're talking about," he thundered, the words reverberating against the walls of the studio. The audience froze, a collective intake of breath echoing like a drum roll. Cameras swiveled to capture every angle of the unfolding drama. Joy's eyes widened slightly, not in fear, but in recognition that she had triggered something she hadn't anticipated. The air between them was thick with electricity. Every viewer watching from home felt it too. This wasn't a typical celebrity interview. This was a collision of worlds, poise and ego, patience and provocation, set against the unforgiving glare of live television. The co-hosts exchanged nervous glances, the usual banter replaced by the stark reality of an eruption they hadn't scripted. The audience murmured, some whispering to each other, some frozen in disbelief. Tom's voice, now louder, more raw, echoed through the set. I am here. I am giving my time, my life, my career, and you sit there and try to dissect me like I'm a specimen. A beat of silence followed, the kind that presses against your chest. And then more murmurs, more gasps. Some audience members stood, unsure if they were witnessing a meltdown or a revelation. Joy, ever the provocateur, leaned back slightly, her voice measured but sharp. I'm just asking questions, questions everyone wants answers to. Tom's eyes blazed, a mixture of incredulity and fury swirling in them. Questions, he roared. Those aren't questions. Those are traps. You're trying to corner me, to make me small. The audience recoiled, caught in the whirlwind of emotion. Cameras captured every angle, his hands gesturing emphatically, his face flushed, the controlled fury spilling out in waves that seemed almost cinematic in their intensity. For a moment, time seemed to slow. The studio lights highlighted every droplet of sweat on his forehead, every micro-expression betraying a man on the edge of losing control. The audience leaned in, collectively holding their breath. Even the crew behind the cameras were silent, as if the world had shrunk down to just the two of them, the provocateur and the icon, locked in a battle of wills. Joy's response was calm, almost eerily so, and that only seemed to fuel Tom further. Tom, I respect you. I'm fascinated by you. But you don't have to attack me to make your point. Attack you? Tom shouted, voice breaking slightly with emotion. I'm not attacking. I'm defending my life. My choices. My career. You think it's entertainment to push someone to the edge. The room trembled with the intensity of his words. Some audience members gasped audibly, while others whispered to themselves, unsure whether to cheer, scream, or flee. The live feed captured it all. The iconic star, human and vulnerable, showing a side the world rarely sees. And just as it seemed the storm might settle, Tom's voice dropped slightly, quieter but no less fierce, carrying a weight that made the audience shiver. I will not let anyone reduce me to a caricature. Not today. Not here. The co-hosts exchanged quick, uneasy glances. Joy's smile had softened, but the fire in her eyes remained. She knew she had pushed too far, but also she had captured a moment that would haunt television history. The audience, now fully awake, leaned forward in their seats. Some cheered, some clapped hesitantly, others sat in stunned silence. The cameras kept rolling, catching every flicker of expression, every shift in body language, every heartbeat of this real-life drama unfolding before millions. This was only the beginning. The storm had been unleashed, and there was no turning back. Behind the polite introduction and staged laughter, a raw confrontation had erupted. One that would leave viewers talking for days, if not weeks. And as the show cut to a commercial break, whispers filled the studio. Did you see that? He actually exploded. I've never seen him like that. This is insane. The story had already taken on a life of its own. What began as a casual interview had spiraled into something far more intense. A revelation not just about a man in the spotlight, but about the fragile balance between fame, scrutiny, and human emotion. The world was watching, and nobody would ever see Tom Cruise, or daytime television, the same way again. The cameras returned from the commercial break, but the energy on set had shifted irreversibly. The audience was buzzing, whispers bouncing like electricity through the studio, while Tom sat back in his chair, his posture taut, every muscle coiled like a spring. He had calmed slightly, but the fire in his eyes refused to dim. Joy Behar, perched across from him, maintained her signature grin, sharp, playful, but now tinged with the faintest hint of wariness. The co-hosts tried to steer the conversation back to safer territory. Tom, let's talk about Top Gun, Maverick. One of them suggested, voice careful, like stepping across a field of thin ice. The stunts, the flying, the pressure. How do you keep that intensity under control? Tom's response was measured, but carried the weight of his earlier eruption. Control? He repeated, a small, ironic smile playing at the corner of his mouth. I don't control it. I channel it. Every risk, every challenge, it's real. That's the only way to make it believable. The audience leaned in, hanging on his every word. Some clapped softly, some cheered quietly, but all eyes were on him, the tension palpable. Joy, sensing the opening, leaned forward. Her voice was deceptively light, almost teasing. But isn't there a cost, Tom? You've pushed yourself harder than anyone else, risked life and limb. Do you ever wonder if maybe you take it too far? The pause that followed was deafening. Tom's jaw tightened, and the room seemed to contract around him. The lights overhead reflected off the polished set like spotlights on a man teetering on the edge. He leaned forward, hands planted firmly on the table, fingers digging in just enough to convey the storm beneath the surface. You think I don't know the cost? He said, voice low but carrying an intensity that made the audience shiver. Every jump, every stunt, every choice, I feel it. Every single time. But that's the point. Life isn't about sitting back and playing it safe. It's about feeling, living, and giving everything. And yes, it's dangerous. Yes, it's intense. But that's the only way it matters. Joy didn't flinch. Her tone, calm yet insistent, pressed the knife further. Some people say your intensity can overwhelm everyone around you, she said softly, her words like a scalpel. Colleagues, co-stars, even fans. Do you ever worry about that? Tom's eyes flared. The polite veneer had vanished. Overwhelm. He spat the word like fire. Do you know what it's like to be under a microscope every day of your life? To have every action, every decision analyzed, criticized, turned into entertainment? I work, I sweat, I risk my life on camera, and you, he paused, voice rising, then cut himself off for a heartbeat, as if forcing restraint. The audience collectively leaned forward, feeling the tension squeeze the air. You think I intimidate? He continued, voice shaking with controlled fury. You think I'm a character to be studied and judged? I'm a person, a human being. The audience gasped audibly, the collective intake of breath echoing through the studio like thunder. Cameras zoomed in on his face, capturing the raw emotion. The glint of frustration in his eyes, the slight tremor in his hands, the way his entire body radiated barely contained energy. Joy's eyes, normally twinkling with mischief, softened for a fraction of a second. Tom, I'm not trying to hurt you, she said, voice quieter, almost conciliatory. I just want to understand you, the person behind the stunts, the fame, the movies. Why the intensity? Why the perfection? Tom leaned back in his chair, a sharp exhale escaping his lips. For a moment, he looked exhausted, like a fighter finally allowed a moment to drop his guard. Perfection? He muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. It's not about perfection. It's about truth. The truth of the moment. If I don't give everything, then it isn't real. It doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. My job, my life, my choices, they're mine. And I refuse to apologize for them. The room went silent. The audience was frozen, caught between awe and shock. Some whispered to neighbors, I've never seen him like this, while others sat stunned, unable to process the raw humanity spilling from a man usually seen as untouchable. Joy shifted slightly, a subtle signal that she was ready to escalate, but cautiously. Tom, some might say that kind of intensity, maybe it scares people. It's overwhelming. Can you handle that, the way people react to you? The question hit like a fuse lighting a powder keg. Tom's eyes darkened, his voice now a mix of disbelief, exasperation, and fury. Scares people, he barked. I'm not here to be comfortable for anyone else. I'm not here to be a story, a headline, a talking point. I'm here to live, to give, to push myself beyond limits. And if that scares people, that's their problem, not mine. The audience erupted into murmurs and applause, a mix of shock and admiration. Some stood, some leaned forward, unable to tear their eyes away. Every camera on set tried to capture the moment, the electricity, the rawness. Even the co-hosts were caught off guard, exchanging glances as if silently asking, how do we navigate this? Joy's smile returned, thin and controlled. I see, she said softly, leaning back. So it's all or nothing. No compromises. No apologies. Tom's eyes met hers, and for a heartbeat, the room held its collective breath. The energy was taut, a live wire. Exactly, he said, voice lower but no less powerful. No compromises. No apologies. I am who I am, and I will not be diminished. The audience shifted, some applauding, some gasping, some frozen in disbelief. Cameras captured the subtle details. A bead of sweat running down his temple, the slight trembling of his hands, the intensity of a gaze that seemed to bore into every viewer watching at home. Joy tilted her head, a flicker of curiosity replacing the earlier edge. And what happens when people don't understand that, Tom? Tom's eyes narrowed. He leaned in, voice dropping to a tone that made every word feel like a challenge. Then they watch, they witness, they see the truth unfold. And if they still don't understand, that's not my concern. My concern is truth, integrity, and the moment itself. Everything else. Noise. The audience erupted again, some clapping, some cheering, some still and stunned silence. The co-hosts tried to regain composure, but the energy had shifted irreversibly. The cameras continued rolling, documenting every flicker, every breath, every heartbeat of the confrontation. And then, in a quiet but deadly deliberate voice, Tom leaned back, gaze sweeping across the room. This is me. Take it or leave it. I will not be cornered. I will not be silenced. And I will not be reduced to a soundbite for anyone's amusement. A hush fell over the audience, followed by a ripple of applause. Some rose to their feet, cheering. Some remained frozen in disbelief, while others whispered to neighbors, This is the real Tom Cruise. It was a moment that would define the broadcast, that would dominate headlines, and that would leave every viewer questioning what it truly means to be a star under the unrelenting glare of fame. The intensity had reached a new peak, and everyone in the room, audience, hosts, crew, and viewers at home, felt the seismic shift. As the cameras cut to a wide shot of the studio, the energy lingered, a tangible force. Every chair, every light, every microphone seemed to hum with it. The confrontation was far from over, but one thing was clear. Nothing would ever be the same again on The View. The studio lights flickered slightly, as if responding to the electricity crackling in the air. The audience sat rigid, eyes wide, some leaning forward, some gripping the arms of their chairs, and all of them holding their collective breath. Tom Cruise, still tense, his jaw set like steel, stared across the table at Joy Behar, who seemed almost untouchable in her composure. But beneath her cool exterior, there was a spark, recognition that she had stirred something no one could control. Tom, Joy began, voice deceptively calm, you've always said you give everything to your craft. But isn't there a part of you that regrets it? That wonders if maybe some things are too much? The question landed like a hammer. For a heartbeat, Tom's expression froze. A flash of disbelief, a flicker of something deeper, something human that few had ever glimpsed. Then, almost imperceptibly at first, he leaned forward. His hands clenched into fists on the table, knuckles white, and his voice, once calm, then fiery, now carried an edge that cut through the studio air like glass shattering. Regret? He repeated, voice low, then rising, cracking with emotion. Do you think I regret giving my all? Do you think for a second that the life I've lived, the risks, the stunts, the sacrifices, I regret that? The audience gasped. A few people whispered, I've never seen him like this, and the murmurs spread like wildfire. Cameras zoomed in on his face, capturing the intensity. The slight twitch in his eye, the flare of his nostrils, the tension in his jaw that spoke louder than words ever could. Joy, leaning slightly forward, met his gaze steadily. But Tom, she pressed, voice deliberate, people say that your intensity, it's too much. That it overwhelms everyone around you. That it's frightening. The words acted like a fuse lighting an already volatile situation. Tom's eyes darkened, a flash of incredulity and raw emotion exploding across his features. His voice thundered across the studio, vibrating with a mix of fury and disbelief. Frightening, he bellowed. Do you have any idea what it's like to live in a world where every move, every word, every choice is dissected, judged, analyzed, and twisted into a story you didn't write? To risk everything, put yourself on the line, and then have someone, anyone, stand there and reduce your life to a sentence. The audience recoiled slightly at the force of his words. Some clapped hesitantly, unsure whether to cheer or hold back, while others whispered to neighbors, their voices trembling with awe. The cameras, relentless, captured every micro-expression. The flare of his eyes, the tension in his shoulders, the trembling of his hands as he gripped the edge of the table. Joy's smile didn't falter, but her eyes sharpened. Tom, I respect you, she said, voice calm but piercing. I'm trying to understand the man behind the persona. Why are you so defensive? Why does it hurt so much when people question you? Tom's chest rose and fell rapidly. The studio seemed to shrink, the lights glaring, the microphones picking up every syllable with brutal clarity. He leaned forward, voice dropping, slow and deliberate now, each word cutting through the tension like a knife. Because it's not just questions, he snapped, teeth clenched. It's assumptions. It's judgment. It's people trying to cage a life that is bigger than their understanding. I have lived more fully, more dangerously, more passionately than most people ever will. And you dare to call that frightening? A hush fell over the audience. The co-hosts exchanged nervous glances, some attempting to interject, but the room felt like it had condensed around the confrontation, isolating Tom and Joy in a bubble of intensity. Even the production crew seemed frozen, cameras locked, lights fixed, as if they too were caught in the drama. Joy leaned back slightly, her voice still steady, yet now softer, more probing. But what about those who've worked with you, Tom? Your co-stars, your crew? Do you ever think they feel pressured, intimidated? That was the final spark. Tom's hands slammed onto the table, the sound echoing like a drumbeat through the studio. His voice rose, controlled fury, now almost palpable. Pressured, he yelled. You think they don't understand dedication? You think they don't see the sacrifices? I push myself because I demand excellence, not because I want to intimidate. But if my passion, my drive, my standards make others uncomfortable, that is not weakness on my part, that is human truth. The audience erupted. Some cheered, some gasped, some simply stared, frozen in disbelief. The live feed captured it all. Sweat glistening on his forehead, eyes blazing, every word reverberating like thunder. Cameras shifted frantically, trying to cover the raw energy, the confrontation unfolding like a live-action thriller. Joy, sensing the storm she had unleashed, finally allowed a flicker of recognition across her face. Her tone softened, though still incisive. Tom, I didn't mean to. I'm trying to understand you. But maybe I pushed too far. Tom's breathing was heavy, measured but loud enough that the audience could hear. He leaned back, gripping the chair arms, the tension radiating off him in waves. Too far, he said, voice dropping, deadly calm now. Do you have any idea what it feels like to live your life being questioned, doubted, dissected, reduced? That's what I've been fighting my entire career. And every time I give everything, I'm told it's too much. Well, guess what? It's not too much. It's everything. And I will not apologize for being real, for being alive, for being me. The studio fell silent again, the weight of his words pressing down on every seat, every camera, every heart. The audience was stunned, frozen in a collective gasp. Some sat back in awe, some whispered urgently, "This is unbelievable." The studio fell silent again, the weight of his words pressing down on every seat, every camera, every heart. The audience was stunned, frozen in a collective gasp. Some sat back in awe, some whispered urgently, "This is unbelievable." Joy leaned forward one final time, voice quieter, almost conciliatory, but still probing. So what do you want people to understand, Tom? What should they see when they see you? Tom's eyes swept across the room, over the audience, the crew, the cameras, every corner of the set, every witness to this eruption. His voice softened slightly, but the intensity never wavered. I want them to see passion, commitment, fearlessness. I want them to see that a life lived fully is messy, intense, and sometimes frightening, but it is real. And if they can't handle that, that's their problem. Not mine. The room exhaled collectively. The tension didn't vanish. It lingered, heavy like smoke after a storm. The audience, still processing, slowly began to clap, some hesitant, some enthusiastic, but all moved by the raw humanity they had just witnessed. Cameras pulled back to capture the full set. The iconic star, still fierce, still unyielding, and the fearless host, now cautiously respectful, both locked in a tension that would become instant television legend. The co-hosts exhaled in relief, whispers exchanged. That was unreal. The broadcast rolled toward its final segment, but the air remained charged. The confrontation had not just entertained, it had revealed a human truth, a glimpse of vulnerability beneath the celebrity armor. A reminder that fame and intensity often exist in a delicate, combustible balance. Even as the show moved on, the whispers persisted. The audience, both live and at home, replayed every word, every gesture. Social media would soon explode. Headlines would appear within minutes. Tom Cruise explodes on The View would trend worldwide. Clips of the confrontation would be dissected, discussed, shared. And everyone, co-stars, fans, even the public, would be left asking the same question. How much can one man give before the world pushes back too hard? The storm wasn't over. But in this moment, for the viewers, the audience, and Tom himself, the intensity had reached its apex. And there was no turning back. The cameras cut to the wide shot of the studio, but the energy lingered like smoke after a wildfire. The audience was still in shock, some frozen in their seats, some whispering feverishly to neighbors, others clapping slowly, unsure whether they had just witnessed a meltdown or a revelation. The lights overhead seemed too bright now, casting harsh shadows that mirrored the tension still rippling through the room. Tom Cruise sat back in his chair, chest heaving slightly, his hands unclenching as the adrenaline began to ebb, leaving behind the raw residue of emotion. Sweat gleamed on his brow, and for a brief moment, the meticulously polished Hollywood icon was just a man. Human, vulnerable, and real. Every eye in the room, every camera lens, every microphone had captured that. No one would ever forget it. Joy Behar, usually the fearless instigator, finally allowed herself a slow exhale. Her smile, once playful, was now tempered with respect. She tilted her head, studying Tom, as if trying to reconcile the persona she had challenged with the man she had just witnessed. "Tom, I get it now," she said quietly, voice softer than before. "I see why you are who you are, and why nothing less than everything is enough." Tom's gaze swept the room, audience, co-hosts, crew, all of them witnesses to the storm he had unleashed. For a moment, the tension softened, replaced by an almost electric stillness, a collective understanding of the weight and intensity that came with a life lived fully in the unforgiving glare of fame. The audience began to stir, some clapping hesitantly, then more confidently as they processed the confrontation. Whispers turned to murmurs, murmurs to exclamations. People rose to their feet, cheering, clapping, some even on the verge of tears. They had seen something rare, a celebrity stripped of pretense, humanized in a way that few live broadcasts ever dared to capture. Social media, already buzzing, erupted within minutes. Clips of Tom's emotional outburst were shared, dissected, and debated. Headlines splashed across news sites. Tom Cruise unleashes fury on The View, intensity or outburst. Fans debate Tom Cruise's explosive interview, live TV drama. Tom Cruise confronts Joy Behar. Every post carried the same awestruck sentiment. The world had witnessed a moment that transcended gossip and celebrity. It had touched something primal about passion, intensity, and human vulnerability. Fans flooded platforms with reactions, some defending him fiercely, others marveling at his honesty. "I've never seen anyone stand their ground like that," one tweet read. "That was raw, real, and unforgettable," commented another. Clips went viral, remixed with slow motion and dramatic music, analyzed frame by frame, each subtle gesture dissected. Inside the studio, the co-hosts exhaled in relief, but the gravity of what had unfolded hung in the air. They knew they had witnessed television history, a confrontation that would be replayed for months, if not years. Producers whispered hurriedly, already planning highlights, commentary, and follow-up interviews. The crew exchanged astonished glances. Even seasoned television professionals admitted in hushed tones that they had never seen a live broadcast this intense. Back in the audience, people lingered in their seats long after the cameras stopped rolling, unable to shake the impact of what they had seen. Conversations erupted. "He's not just an actor, he's human. I can't believe how raw that was. I've never seen anyone express that much intensity and passion in real time." The episode would be dissected endlessly in talk shows, podcasts, and fan forums. Analysts debated the fine line between intensity and overreaction. Critics weighed in on his emotional honesty, and fans defended his unrelenting commitment to authenticity. Yet beyond the debates, one thing was undeniable. Tom Cruise had revealed a side of himself that few had ever seen, forcing the world to confront the reality behind the myth. Joy Behar herself reflected on the exchange in interviews later, calling it one of the most intense moments in live television I've ever experienced. She acknowledged that the questions had pushed boundaries, but also revealed the depth of passion and commitment behind the public persona of a man the world thought it understood. For Tom, the aftermath was a mixture of vindication and exhaustion. He had defended not just his career, but the integrity of his entire approach to life and craft. He had reminded the world that fame is not a shield. It is a crucible, and that true dedication often comes with fire, confrontation, and raw emotion. And for the millions watching at home, it was more than entertainment. It was a reminder that beneath every celebrity facade, there is humanity, intensity, and truth waiting to be revealed. People shared clips, debated endlessly, and more than anything, felt connected to a story that was larger than Hollywood gossip. It was real life, raw and unfiltered. So now we turn to you, the viewer. What do you think of Tom Cruise's explosive confrontation on The View? Was it justified passion or an overreaction under pressure? How do you see the balance between celebrity scrutiny and human vulnerability? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Your opinion matters, and we want to hear every perspective. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to Stage View. Hit that like button, share this story, and stay tuned for more explosive, intense, and cinematic tales from the world of entertainment. Stories that bring you behind the curtain and into the heart of the drama you've only ever glimpsed from afar. This was more than an interview. It was a moment in television history, a collision of fame, passion, and truth. And the echoes of it will linger in the audience, the media, and the hearts of fans for a long, long time.